All right, hey everyone, it's Julien Meyer from NorthStar Venture Partners, back with another video discussing tips and tricks for founders. And today what we're going to be talking about is 5 ways for founders to better communicate with investors. So first and foremost, know your numbers. That's tip number 1. What I mean by that is if you don't know your numbers and you don't know why you're asking for the money that you're raising, you don't know how you're spending it, you're kind of dead in the water before you got started, right? Remember, you're talking to investors. These people, us, on our side of the table, we primarily care about the numbers. We want to see where the money's going. We want to see why you're asking for this money. And I can't tell you how often, especially at conferences and even in the day-to-day deal flow for us, where we have investors, where we have founders pitching us rather, the amount of founders that just ask us for a number of money, for a dollar amount. They say, oh, we need 1.2 million for this, and don't have anything to back it up. They have no Excel sheet, they have no budget, they have not even a complex model, but they don't have the simplest understanding as to what their numbers are or are going to be. It's a dead in the water conversation. We thank them for their time and move on. So the simplest way to remedy this, 2 things, what we tell founders. Number 1, create a budget. Create a budget, a growth budget, for things that you know you're going to need to spend money on in the future to grow your business. Right? So take that budget, create that budget, and calculate how much money you're going to be spending every month. That's your burn rate. Right? This is if you don't have a burn rate or if you don't have a budget already, create these things. It's very simple. Then at least you know you can take that budget, you can take that burn rate, how much money you're going to be spending each month, multiply it by 12 months or by 18 months, so times 12 or times 18, which are typical runway times, and you'll come up with a dollar amount that you need to raise that has an actual basis. You can show that very simple but nice spreadsheet. Number 2, create a very, very simple profit and loss. You already know your loss or your expenses, how much money you're going to be spending, right? And you can very simply subtract that from how much money you anticipate you're going to be making. The number 1 thing founders tell us is, well, we don't know that yet. We haven't built a product, it's on the market. Fine. But you have to have an idea. Is this a software that you're going to roughly try and sell for $2.99 a month? Or is this a piece of hardware that's going to sell for $60 a unit? Right? And the second thing they say is, well, I don't know how many customers I'm going to have. So start with 5. Or is 10 more realistic? Start with something realistic and then make it grow by 10% or 20%. Because if you're building a business, you should be able to do that relatively early on if you're going to scale it up. So then there you have at least a basis for your revenue number, and you can very simply subtract what you already put together, your burn rate, and create a nice little profit and loss sheet. Now, if that sounds like way too much work or too complex, there's a great piece of software that'll do this for you. And they don't endorse, I actually should have reached out to them before this video, but we use them on a day-to-day basis for our portfolio companies and for our clients. It's called LivePlan, liveplan.com. I'll put a link to it in the description to this video. LivePlan has literally a budgeting and financial planning tool that is very simple, very easy to use, and guides you through step-by-step how to put together one of these financial plans. So that's number 1, know your numbers. Don't start off dead in the water. Speak the investor language of numbers, okay? That flows really nicely into number 2, which is know the lingo. Just like in any industry, there's industry jargon. Right? Developers versus real estate people are going to say different things. Developers know things like PHP or HTML or CSS. Real estate people know things like permitting contracts or government blockers or zoning approval. Right? These are very different industries, but they both have their own jargon. And the reason for bringing that up is because investors, we have our own jargon too, right? What is your customer acquisition cost, CAC? What's your LTV, lifetime value of a customer, right? Know the lingo, know the terms, so that when you're sitting down with an investor, you can speak the same language. Just like you're speaking the numbers language in point 1, in point 2, it's know the industry jargon. And there's 2 really good resources for this. The first one is a book called Venture Deals by Brad Feld. Especially if you're in the tech world, if you're in the world of startups, you need to take a look at Venture Deals, because Brad Feld goes through and basically wrote an entire book that's designed to make you quote unquote smarter than your investors. You can negotiate better. I also have a book out. It's called First Money In. I'll put a link to it in the description to this video. And it has an entire glossary at the end of the book of all the terms that you may need to know during one of these fundraisers. So know the lingo. It'll make the conversation 10 times smoother when you're trying to communicate your story to an investor. Number 3, again, flowing super nice into point 2, or tip 2. Go light on the tech speak, right? Every startup, no matter how oriented in software it is, no matter how focused on a specific industry or specific piece of technology, you're going to have what's known as quote unquote tech speak, right? What makes you guys special? What makes this venture unique, okay? You have to include that. You have to include what's unique, you have to include what's special. But you don't have to spend 10 hours telling me about why you program something better than the next person, or explain to me why in your industry this one little thing that you did creates all this impact because it made this massive change and you went in and technically it's not all this. Simplify that. Simplify the tech speak. Because to be totally honest with you, we probably don't even know what you're talking about. We're going to sit there and smile and nod because we want to sound smart. That's the trick with investors, is we're always going to want to sound like the smarter person on the other side of the table, but oftentimes we'll just lose you. And if we lose you, and if we can't communicate to our team and to our investors that we deal with, because remember folks, most investment groups have investors that they have to relay information to. If we can't easily relay the information that you're trying to convey to us in a pitch, it's going to be really tough for us to give you a check because we won't be able to get approval. So go light on the tech speak. We're not saying to eliminate it completely, just go a little bit lighter. Number 4, be conscious of time. Investors in general are not just very busy people, we're all very busy people, so I'm not going to use that statement, but are constantly dealing with massive amounts of deal flow, meaning that we're seeing not just your pitch on that day, we're not just having a phone call with you, we're having 5, 10, 20 of these pitch meetings or these phone calls per day. It's very easy for investors to get burned out. And so you have to really be conscious of time and say, if I can convey my message in 10, 15, 20 minutes, as opposed to the full 30 or 45 that this investor is giving me, that probably means that they're going to have 10 extra minutes to get a cup of coffee or get some water before their next call, and think about how much they liked my presentation. As funny as that sounds, right? Because the temptation is, oh, well, let me take the full 30 minutes. Trust me, if you get the pitch out quicker and you leave a little bit of time for Q&A, it goes a long way with investors. If we're interested, we'll ask you to keep going. Trust us. So it's better to get to a point where you give us the opportunity to ask you to keep going and you try and fish for that opportunity, as opposed to just trying to jam as much information down our throats in that 30-minute time frame or window that we give you to pitch us. Finally, and probably the best tip on here, is start off your conversations with investors with some kind of rope-in fact. We call it a rope-in fact. Meaning that you have some kind of statistic, you have some kind of number, something that's such a jarring statistic, something that's so profound, something that's so crazy, it's almost unbelievable. Right? For example, you could say something like, the reason we decided to do this startup is because there's 8 trillion bytes of data created on the internet per minute. I don't know if that's true, but if you think about it, that's a pretty enticing stat. My response is probably going to be, really? How did you find that out? Right? And so that starts a conversation. That starts a very unique and fruitful conversation that's more focused on what you're doing or building as a startup. Now I'm going to start poking and prodding and asking for more. I'm going to say, okay, well, how'd you guys figure that out and what are you doing to solve it? Okay, really? Wow, that's interesting. And how far along are you guys? If you're having that conversation with an investor and those are the types of questions that you're hearing, you're on the right track, because the one thing you never want to hear is, oh, okay, cool, great. Thanks for telling me about that. Okay, nice. Great. That may sound positive, it's not. That's just us basically saying, we gave you this 30 minutes, so we're going to be respectful, but we're not at all interested. By starting with some kind of rope-in fact, you make it very, very easy for the investor to kind of pique their interest and say, okay, wait, let me guide the conversation because I want to know more now. So as a recap, folks, really simple stuff, but extremely effective if you take these 5 tips to heart. First and foremost, as a recap, know your numbers. Create a very simple budget, a very simple profit and loss. If that's too complicated, use liveplan.com. Knowing your numbers will help you get off to a better start with any investor at any stage in the game. Number 2, know the lingo, know the jargon, right? Reference one of these books that I'm telling you about, First Money In or Venture Deals. Take a look at the glossaries. Know the jargon so that you, A, don't get confused when investors ask you those questions with that jargon, and B, so that you can ask them some questions with that jargon to show that you know what you're doing. Number 3, go light on the text speech. Remember, don't eliminate the text speech, just go light. Give me the light version of what makes you guys special or of your technology. I don't need to know all the background, all the history, the 20 years of experience. Just give me the most important morsels. And just like everything else in this video, tip 4 kind of sums it up best. It's being conscious of time. It's being conscious of the fact that investors are constantly seeing different decks, different pieces, different founders, different pieces of different industries. We're constantly dealing with a whole bunch of deal flow. Just be conscious of our time. It's very, very simple. If anything, it kind of makes your job a little bit easier as a founder when you're pitching. You just want to get to the lightest version of what you can pitch us, but that also includes tip number 5, which is that rope in fact. You want to lead off and start with that rope in fact, that jarring question or statement or fact that's going to really pull someone in, pull an investor in to ask you questions about your business and get the conversation going in the right direction. So folks, once again, I'm Julien Meyer, Managing Director at NorthStar Venture Partners. This has been 5 ways for founders to better communicate with investors. If you have any questions, comments, if you want to connect with us, feel free to visit our website, www.northstarvp.com. Thanks so much for checking out this video. Take care.